Well, ladies and gentlemen of the interwebs, it looks like the James Comey fix
is in.
Viva Fry, former Montreal litigator turned current Florida rumbler, in my home office with a vlog update on the James Comey indictment coming out of the Eastern District of Virginia. I've said this before and I'll say it again. If James Comey walks, it will only be the result of judicial or jury nullification, and it looks like we are at step one of the judge nullification. In this case, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like
the fix is in.
Now, earlier this week, James Comey filed a motion to dismiss the indictment against him. He argues vindictive prosecution, hashtag confession through projection. He made a motion to dismiss the charges against him, and the DOJ responded with further allegations of the extent of his corruption, his lying under oath, his leaking information for the purposes of it being leaked to the media via his friend and professor of law at Columbia University, Dan Richmond. We'll get to that in a second. I went through the additional allegations the state has levied against James Comey, but he recently fell upon a Virginia state federal magistrate judge who...
The fix is in, people.
From NBC News, Justice Department. Judge accuses prosecutors in James Comey case of taking, unquote, indict first, investigate later, end quote, approach. Magistrate Judge William Fitzpatrick voiced his concerns at a hearing about how prosecutors were handling evidence against the former FBI director. You want to talk about cases of indict first, investigate later? I would introduce you to all of the cases brought against Donald Trump, his attorneys, Rudy Giuliani, Steve Bannon, Peter Navarro. It is a case of confession through projection for this magistrate judge to accuse the DOJ of indict first and investigate later. They fleshed out the allegations against James Comey. He is dead to rights, barring judicial or jury nullification, and this looks a heck of a lot like the judicial nullification that I've been warning about. Wait until you hear what this judge has to say. It is a judge who can't even reconcile his own conflicting ideas in his own head. By Michael Cosner, a federal judge blasted Justice Department prosecutors on Wednesday several times for what he described as an, quote, indict first, investigate later, end quote, attitude in the criminal case against former FBI Director James Comey. Magistrate Judge William Fitzpatrick voiced his concerns at a hearing in a U.S. District Court in Alexandria about how prosecutors from the Eastern District of Virginia were handling evidence against Comey, who was indicted in September on one count of making a false statement and one count of obstructing a congressional proceeding stemming from his testimony on September 30, 2020, during a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. Remember, indict first, investigate later would suggest that the DOJ lacked evidence when they indicted Comey, and you go and hear what this judge, this magistrate judge, has to say, and it becomes abundantly clear this man cannot reconcile his own conflicting thoughts on how to find a way to get James Comey off. Not in that sense, in the legal sense. Now, also, first things first, some people were saying that these magistrate judges are not real judges. It's true and false. They don't have the full powers of actual judges. They are appointed, but they have very many powers of a judge. It's an AI overview, but it's pretty darn decent nonetheless. Yes, federal magistrate judges in Virginia are judicial officers and are considered a type of judge, although their authority is limited compared to district judges. They are appointed by district court judges for 8-year terms and handle many pretrial matters, minor offenses, and other duties to assist the district court. Duty. Now, we don't need to get into the nitty-gritty of the article. I just want to pull out a couple of highlights and you will understand truly how this judge is grasping at straws, doing mental gymnastics to find a way to condemn the DOJ and absolve James Comey. All right, I'm editing this together in the car and I realized that the screenshots from which I'm reading now came from an article in Just the News that I put in a tweet earlier this week. For some reason, the link to this article is no longer available on Just the News, but just a heads up. That's where I'm reading from in this portion coming up right over there. Magistrate Judge William Fitzpatrick of the Eastern District of Virginia made the comments during a brief hearing regarding the case against former FBI Director James Comey. Quote, right now we are in a bit of a feeling of indict first, investigate later, end quote. Fitzpatrick said in the hearing, which lasted less than an hour. Fitzpatrick questioned prosecutors about their handling of data acquired from a number of search warrants between 2019 and 2020, information which is now being used in Comey's case. The judge pressed prosecutors on whether they may have viewed information that may be protected by attorney-client privilege. Can you imagine that this magistrate judge Fitzpatrick is a little bit worried that the DOJ might have viewed materials that were protected by attorney-client privilege when they went after Trump, literally, his attorneys, literally for advice that they gave him in the context of the 2020 election? Now they're concerned about the DOJ potentially breaching solicitor-client privilege. Now, I'm not saying that it would be justifiable if they did. I'm not certain that it happened, and I'm not sure where these concerns are coming from, but these concerns are 100% confession through projection. In the context of Trump's case, they didn't just breach solicitor-client privilege, they went after his solicitors for legal advice that they gave Donald Trump. Later on in the article, Fitzpatrick also noted the size of the trove of documents, saying Comey's defense team has been placed at a disadvantage with a limited time to view the set. Quote, the government has had this for 5.5 years. This is an unfair burden the government is placing on the defense, but I don't see another path forward, end quote, the judge said. Again, not to condone this if it were to be happening to James Comey, but this is literally what they did to Donald Trump when they prosecuted him, dumped thousands and thousands of documents on Donald Trump on the eve of some of these hearings and said, you do your best going through this. This is literally what they did to Trump. I'm not saying this is what they're doing to Comey, although it is par for the course in the legal profession, but my goodness, it takes big cojones to claim that this is being done to James Comey when there doesn't seem to be any evidence to that effect that they are. And it's mutually incompatible with the judge's prior statements. This is a little bit of indict first, investigate later, but you've also had a slew of documents dating back 5 years, and now you're dumping too much documentation on James Comey for him to defend himself. You can't reconcile these two mutually incompatible statements. I mean, you can if you're trying to find a way for judicial nullification to say, oh yeah, it's indict first, investigate later, as though they didn't have sufficient information to indict, but you have too much information that you're dumping on James Comey. It's not fair. Boo-hoo. And just to refresh your memory on the indictment alleges that Comey told Richmond to leak information to reporters, and therefore he lied to the Senate Judiciary Committee when he denied having authorized any media leaks. But Comey's lawyers say he was not referring to Richmond at the time, and that he thought he was responding to a question about former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. And here's where you have Comey's defense just feeding the lines to any potential jurors in the future to the judge right now. Oh, he didn't know that he was lying because he didn't know that he was not talking about Richmond. Oh, he was talking about somebody else. Bullcrap. The man lied one way or the other. But this is how Comey's attorneys are going to get the talking points out to prospective jurors and hope to find at least one juror who's going to say, yeah, I don't believe that James Comey knew he was lying when he said it because he thought he was talking about somebody else. Comey attended the hearing and did not speak and sat at the defense table with his attorney, Fitzgerald, a former U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, and Donaleski, a former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, who did the bulk of the talking for the defense. Comey's wife and his son-in-law, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Troy Edwards Jr., who resigned from the U.S. Attorney's Office after Comey's indictment, sat in the courtroom's first row. James Comey's son-in-law can't find probable cause, and when they bring in an independent attorney, Halligan, to do so, well, then they cry corruption. It's absolute abject insanity. At the prosecution table sat Halligan, who presented the case by herself to the grand jury. Halligan, a former White House aide and former Trump attorney, was named interim U.S. attorney despite her lack of prosecutorial experience after the previous U.S. attorney, Eric Siebert, resigned under pressure to indict Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. Halligan also indicted James, a frequent Trump target who secured a nearly $500 million judgment against him and his companies before he was elected to a second term last year. A New York appeals court later tossed out the civil fraud penalty. James has also pleaded not guilty to charges she similarly describes as political retribution. Oh yeah, she secured a $500 million penalty, which was subsequently tossed by the Court of Appeal. Good job. It wasn't political persecution. Indict first, investigate later, when Letitia James literally campaigned off indicting Donald Trump and then did so. No, that was not political persecution. What happens to them afterwards is political persecution.
Rubbish.
Oh, and by the way, if you like what I do, be sure to like, share, subscribe, turn on notifications so you know when I post a video, and share them with everyone, people who you think would like them and people who you know would not, because they probably need to see it the most. But that is the latest. The fix is in. I'm telling you, I think Comey is probably going to walk, because if it's not judicial nullification through the judge, they are getting their talking points out to a prospective jury pool. And in the Eastern District of Virginia, they are going to find one or two jurors who are simply going to say, I'm not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that James Comey knew he was lying when he said he didn't leak anything to anybody to be leaked to the press, when there is hard evidence, black on white, that he did it repeatedly. But that's the vlog. I better get back to my kids' BJJ course and pick him up, lest they think I left him there. You know what to do if you like what I do, but most importantly, exercise, eat healthy, sunlight, talk to people in real life, and now you know your vlog. Peace out, peeps. Booyah!